Since the beginning of the 21st century and throughout the current decade, digital filmmaking has taken Hollywood by storm. Filmmakers in the industry have gushed about the many unique elements digital brings to the modern movie-making process.
Making a film digitally and releasing a film in the same digital process is a beautiful image. It creates an extraordinary, clean, sharp image.
It's great, and it's really versatile. The cameras are smaller, and they just have an infinite footage in them. They just go on and on and on. Very rarely do you have to like change cards and stuff like that. But that's such a wonderful tool, and they've been lovingly calibrated to create these beautiful, I mean, some gorgeous films and TV shows have been shot digitally, and they are kind of equalizing, because a lot of people can get their hands on those cameras, and the systems even get flooded with them, so you can get a rental for very cheap.
Digital projection for me, the advent of it and when it became really good was a great turning point, because you sit in that cinema and before those curtains open, you feel safe and secure that the DCP is going to always be consistent. You never knew with film prints.
I loved the quality, and I think what I loved about it was it's not film. And, you know, the advances in film, everything is very, very crisp. I mean, you can make it soft if you want, but it's got the film is so beautiful, but it used to be in the 30s less quality, and this DV that I was shooting reminded me of that. So it's just, some information is lost, and it made me feel like there was more room to dream.
But while the technological changes went under a paradigm shift over the years, this conflict of interest has led to the question that has been in the mind of professional film critics, film historians, and audiences. Does digital filmmaking evoke nostalgia for analog? During the early years of cinema, analog was the format directors used in crafting their films, whether it is people walking in a garden, a train arriving to its destination, or a bunch of robbers taking siege of a train. These analogous images during these early years provided the backdrop of what's possible with film, telling fictionalized or true stories with real locations and real people. But as the new century emerged, the film industry had become less analogous and more digitized in the process of movie making. And this we mean by the introduction of digitalization itself. With this new form of movie making, digital has made the process for filmmakers a lot less challenging. The technology is affordable, easier to use, and increases dexterity for filmmakers in productions so they can get the most out of their projects.
Now, if you're a person who has an aptitude, who has an eye, who has some giftings that enable you to be a good visual storyteller, you can now afford the tools to do that and to do it really, really well. And I see that continuing on and on. It's not just, well, I can make a movie with my iPhone. Yeah, you can. But you can now make a real movie with real cinema cameras with really good lenses. And this is stuff that you could not even do a couple of years ago.
Although, as the 21st century continued, and Hollywood swept away by the uniqueness of digital technology, analog was beginning to resurge. Directors such as Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino have continuously voiced their strong support for analog and the many qualities the format contains. In an interview with BBC Newsnight back in 2015, Nolan commented on the adulation he has for analog, whilst also pinpointing out the sustained threat issued to filmmakers transitioning from analog to digital technologies.
I think film's extremely important from a couple of different points of view. For myself as a filmmaker, being able to have the choice to shoot on film, to shoot on celluloid, which is what I love and what I choose to do, that's been under threat the last couple of years, very much. There's been an economic imperative to push digital technology because it's perceived as being cheaper, which it isn't necessarily, but there are a lot of economic interests wanting to sell new equipment, wanting to evolve the industry and make money that way, and they've had a very powerful voice. And so over the last couple of years, filmmakers like myself who wanted to continue shooting on film have been under increasing pressure to modernize, or whatever you want to call it. But for me, film will always have this wonderful richness, the analog color it has, the superior resolution. And when film is projected, the way it was originally intended to be seen, the way you shot the film, you project the film, there's a very unique experience for the audience there that they can't get in their living rooms. And I think that's something that's very, very important.
Most of the movies Nolan had made in his career consist of their construction in the process of analog, with notable films such as the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, and his recent directorial effort Dunkirk, all showcasing not only the filmmaker's never-ending love for the format, but utilizing its many qualities in telling gritty, original, and entertaining stories which are grounded in reality. In addition, Tarantino, like Nolan, evokes the same profound adulation for the analog filmmaking process. During an interview regarding this current debate, Tarantino wholeheartedly expresses his disdain for the technology taking over Hollywood productions of today and causing the demise of films constructed and projected from an analogous perspective.
At least it does nothing for me. It does nothing for me. I mean, I actually think I'm getting gypped when I go to a movie and I realize it's either been shot on digital or being projected in digital. I mean, some people feel differently about this, but I think it's the death keel. I think it's the death rattle. And, you know, yeah, I do.
Of course, this couldn't be any more exemplary of digital's overwhelming influence on the way films are perceived, especially in terms of watching big-budget Hollywood blockbusters. Most blockbuster films nowadays depend solely on action, CGI, and computer-generated pyrotechnics to keep audiences entertained. It is with this notion that filmmakers believe will bring people to the cinema. Action combined alongside technological spectacle as modern audiences strive for spectacular entertainment and visual splendor, which has now become the standard not just in modern productions, but in mainstream cinema as a whole. But it is with this lack of cinematic realism that there's also no denying of the nostalgia digital has now brought to analog filmmaking more than ever before. By defining what is meant by its term, nostalgia is as much about the past as it is about the present, and it is usually conservative since it presents an unsatisfying present and an idealized past. The ideology surrounding such a definition corresponds to some of the most renowned filmmakers currently working in Hollywood. Like Nolan and Tarantino, J.J. Abrams is another proud advocate for analog filmmaking, in which he exemplifies this labor of love and undying passion with Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Star Wars had meant a lot to the filmmaker during his childhood years ever since experiencing the original films, mainly because of how realistic and authentic they felt to him. And because of this, it had inspired him to revert back to traditional filmmaking methods and ensure that the first film in the new trilogy would pay homage to the originals. For the film's cinematography, Abrams hired Dan Mindell to help create the look and feel of The Force Awakens, in which both agreed the film should be seen in a classical way like the original trilogy did, and preserve the legacy to how those films greatly impacted cinema in regards to mixing fantasy with reality.
It was a far more honest decision to preserve the look and feel because it was very classical, how it was made and how the first three stories sort of influenced cinema, and we wanted to
preserve it.
Yeah, stay that way. Low tech, not Aztec, just low tech, and make it far more rooted in traditional filmmaking methodology.
With production just like the original trilogy, sets, vehicles, costumes, and creatures were all designed practically to give the film a realistic authenticity, along with minimal use of CGI in specific scenes. Because of this sense of practicality and realism, fans loved, respected, and identified with the original Star Wars trilogy. And with The Force Awakens, Abrams would be utilizing these past methods in taking the audiences on a nostalgic trip to a galaxy far, far away where everything was, from their perspective, perceived as real and believable. The film went on to garner huge success both critically and commercially, as Jeff Clark, who is the CEO of Kodak, praised Abrams for using Analogue in filming The Force Awakens. He compliments the director as being an extraordinary supporter of film. The film manufacturer was considering pulling the plug until roughly a year ago, when filmmakers including Abrams, Tarantino, and Christopher Nolan worked with all of the major studios to see that they inked supplier deals with Kodak, ensuring film's existence for the foreseeable future. Nearly 3 years after The Force Awakens was released, that more and more directors were going back to film celluloid. Movies like Call Me By Your Name, Baby Driver, The Florida Project, and The Post had all been shot on Analogue. To conclude this video essay, I asked earlier, does digital filmmaking evoke nostalgia to Analogue? And my answer to that would be yes. As long as Analogue continues to exist and be fought for even in this age of digitalization, both technologies should be available for filmmakers of now and the next generation of filmmakers to use in whatever that benefits their interests and which best showcase their creative movie-making talents.
I really don't think, I think celluloid is still going to be a choice. I don't think the fact that you have, Polaroid has gone out.
Painting doesn't take 12 people. Painting doesn't take, painting doesn't have the same...
True, there's financially.
Exactly, you know what I mean? Painting is like, I can...
Well, that's the problem with the digital in the sense, another aspect, I should say, not a problem, but another aspect one has to think, that this idea of the image that is digitized and you think will always be there and it's cheaper and it's faster. Anything cheaper and faster, it makes sense for the businessman to finance, But the danger, especially I think in our culture, is that a cheaper, faster is consumed, bang, goes away. There's nothing. There's no nourishment.
It has to be forced obsolescence.
Yeah. And so that's the danger. Yes, to be cheaper and faster so that it can enable us to enrich a culture rather than just consume it.